To parents who feel uncomfortable talking with their children about money. Why do you feel so uncomfortable when talking to your children about anything related to money or finances? Speaking to your children about investments and financial decisions is extremely important and should be one of the most important things to teach your children while they are growing up. Being able to explain your poor financial decisions to your children could prevent them from making those same mistakes in their future. Your family should be told if you do not have enough money saved in the event of an emergency. It might be hard to tell your family if you do not have money put aside for something that could financially ruin you. But it is important to explain why that is and how you would go about finding a solution. Saving money to be used in the event of an emergency is a very important part of money management. If you don't talk to your children about money management, they will be slower to learn how to spend their money wisely. They may also make the same mistakes you have in the past that could be easily avoided if you discuss those mistakes with them. My parents are very open to me and my siblings when it comes to talking about money. They let me know how much money they make per year and don't feel uncomfortable with talking to me about how much our car and house are worth. Due to my parents' openness about money, I have learned how to save money and be mindful of how I spend money. There are times when it might be better to not talk about money with your family, like when you buy a gift or present for someone, but talking about finances to people you know and trust is a good way to compare how you are saving and spending your money. Money should be discussed with your children, and you shouldn't have to feel like your income is a closely held secret. Sincerely, a college student. Reminds me of an old talk radio finance show tagline: if you're lucky, your parents talk to you about sex. If you're really lucky, they taught you about finance. My cousin and I joked around, dark humor, and said because if they talked to us and found out how much they have made, we wouldn't try as hard because when they die one would inherit their money house in X years, so why bother? I know we like to blame the education system for not teaching us more about money, but I fully support OP and think it starts within our own families. If we don't at least start that conversation there, we can't necessarily point the blame externally either. I plan on being as transparent as possible with my kids, so they are aware of how the world works. I really wish my parents had been more open with how they spent their money, even if just based as percentages of budget income, not actual numbers. I had no idea what I was doing when I was first on my own, got way more apartment than I could afford, had no budget, no emergency fund. Granted, learning the hard way was a solid education. I agree that money shouldn't be a taboo family conversation, and that you should pass on your own knowledge and wisdom to your children, so it's much more inclusive than just money. Teaching your kids how to balance a budget, how taxes work, managing income versus expense, things we do as adults, again, so much more beyond money, gives your children a huge advantage to understand the concept, instead of being thrown into the wild to understand on their own. I 100% disagree with you in regards to being open your own, plus spouses, finances to your young children, because they lack the necessary understanding of how the world works in a relative manner of being an adult. A child may look at their parents' brokerage account, see a dollar amount, and not understand why they can't have a PS5, because they're children. They don't understand that it took a few decades to build. They don't understand discipline versus immediate gratifications and many other concepts, rules that many fiscally responsible people live with. I certainly don't mind opening up more of my finances to my children once they're around your age, in or around college, so young adult, but your perspective is different than that of mine, since I'm considerably older than you. Props to your parents if it worked though. When I was a kid, my parents gave a book of fake checks. They gave me a job with a weekly salary and weekly bills. It was all fake money, for buying fake things. I had a really active imagination. It taught me about things like saving money for large purchases. I would ask my parents things like, how much does a four-wheeler cost? They would give me a number, and then I would save my fake money up to buy my fake ATV. So in some small sense it was the start of learning the value of money. They also taught me how to balance the checkbook, so a lot of arithmetic. I was very young at the time, like 7. As I got older they were pretty open with finances. The only time they were was when they were paying 2 mortgages while trying to sell their house in 2008. Money was tight and they didn't want to freak me out. But after everything worked out they told me about it. As a father, I try to teach my children about finances. My hope is to teach my children to be financially responsible and self-reliant. My 17-year-old has a part-time job, and I show him about tracking his expenses and budgeting. He has now saved about $4,000 from his part-time job. I have met people way into their 20s not being able to pay their own bills online and so on. These people were not been rich in the sense their trust fund advisor sorted it, but just like never learned it. It boggles my mind that parents chose to not teach their kids the absolutely basics, and then opt to be some sort of middleman every time rent or phone bill is due. Same with the children too. How could you want your mom to log into your account, to settle a $25 bill seeing everything you spent, etc.? I think it's a delicate balance, and sometimes parents don't want to go too far in either direction. My parents spoke very negatively about money, told us how broke they were, and even worse, blamed us kids and the government for making them broke, even though my parents wanted kids and meticulously planned all their pregnancies. Money was always a burden held over our heads. However, to my parents' credit, they did teach us how to save and appreciate the value of the dollar, even if it was done in a not so nice, shameful way. My husband's parents never spoke about money, not even with each other. It got so bad to the point that Mill's gambling problem nearly caused them to file for bankruptcy a couple of years back, and they had to ask husband's grandparents for a loan, just so they wouldn't lose everything. Husband was totally and completely shocked by this news, and even as an outsider, I was absolutely not. I saw that shit a mile away. But his family lacks basic financial literacy. We have a very young son, and another baby on the way, and we're definitely going to try to strike a balance of how to talk to our kids about money. Husband and I have also worked hard on overcoming differences regarding spending money. I tend to be much more frugal, and want to save as much as possible, as I have an admittedly pessimistic outlook on things, and never want my family to suffer in the event of a job loss or medical emergency. And husband has a tendency to let money burn a hole in his pocket. If he works a couple weekends of overtime, he's ready to throw that money towards a couple new toys, rather than put away in savings. I know much of this is from our own upbringings, and we have worked hard to balance each other out as much as possible. When the time comes to educate our kids, I hope we can approach with a very balanced approach. I think that's where a lot of parents feel lost and then just never bring it up. So you can teach your children about money and investing without being very open about your own situation. Well, it's very important to me to teach our children to be fiscally intelligent and responsible. I have no interest in telling them how we are doing financially because it's not theirs. I have no interest in them communicating our situation to anyone else, as I've seen a number of friends' children do. I don't want them to expect us to solve their problems for them because we likely won't.